So this panel is titled If I Ran the Shakespeare Project, and back in November, a bunch of us got together, or was it December, and ran that topic by some of our formerly incarcerated citizens. And we're going to briefly re-invite you to that conversation and continue it. Hopefully you got a chance to see the recording, but even if you didn't, you'll have enough to go on here. My name is Jonathan Shailor. I'm director of the Shakespeare Prison Project in Wisconsin. And that's all you need to know about me right now. I'm not going to give you the long, flowery one. You can read about me in the press. And let's hear who our other participants are, if they would introduce themselves.
Hi guys, what do they say? You should never work with animals and kids. So I tried to open the blinds to show you the beautiful sunshine this morning, and now they won't close. So I'm in a different position now. My name is Stephen. I was sentenced to prison for murder back in 2000 and served 18 years. And part of my healing and progression was with the Queensland Shakespeare Ensemble and performing Shakespeare plays. I've been out 2 years now, and I still see Dr. Rob Pensalfini and Jonathan and Scott, and been following what you guys do intently.
And Rob?
Yes, my name's Rob Pensalfini. I'm the artistic director of the Queensland Shakespeare Ensemble, and we run our Shakespeare Prison Project. We've been running it in high security prisons in Queensland, which is the top right-hand corner of Australia, if you're looking at a map, since 2006. And yes, Steve and I have known each other for 10 years. Yeah.
Fantastic. And we did have two other participants on this panel who unfortunately were not able to be here today. One was Haisan Williams from the Shakespeare Prison Project in Wisconsin, and also from that project, Michael Shortt. So we'll be bringing their voices into today's discussion through our recollections of their contributions back in 2020, not that long ago. And I'm just going to get it rolling by just quickly reading off a couple of things from my notes, and then I'm sure there'll be lots to talk about. It's a free-flowing conversation. We can pick up anything we want to. As I said again, the theme was If I Ran the Shakespeare Project. So I'm going to go right to that one and tell you what our formerly incarcerated citizens said they would do. Haisan said he would have more integration with the community. He would include alumni from the Shakespeare Prison Project as facilitators and make it as seamless as possible in terms of working with formerly incarcerated citizens as mentors. He would also focus on victim empathy. Michael Shortt said that he would run it like a trade union. Then he specified what he meant by that was he would assign work roles. He would make sure that everybody didn't just act, but that there would be a props manager, there would be somebody in charge of being on book, and we would do that normally in the project in a kind of ad hoc way, but he would do that more formally and make sure that everybody had some sort of job like that in addition to their acting role. And Steve said that he would bring in writing, make that an important part of the project, including poems and other forms of writing. And in fact, he thought writing like Shakespeare would be an interesting element. He would also want to start a group on the outside, tying in with Haisan's idea. And his overarching goal would be to change the narrative about returned citizens. So that's what they started with. One other theme that was throughout that I just wanted to mention was that the importance of character work, playing multiple roles in a play, doing role reversal, playing a role that resonates with the situation of your victim. This came up again and again as an important feature of the process that they'd want to keep going. So does that trigger any interesting thoughts or questions for the group? I leave it to you.
Yeah, well, I can go, Rob. I suppose the writing, I think with me, what I tangled myself with was the literature and the hidden concepts in behind what Shakespeare's trying to say I think he's leaving it up to the artist to spread their message. So I thought in trying to write down some of those ideas, it can be a rehabilitative process in thinking of things that may not have naturally occurred, or things that we try and ignore or don't become conscious of generally.
Hey, this is Erica from the Old Globe in San Diego, and my collaborator James Pillar is on as well. And I loved why I only caught the video yesterday. I was so glad for the reminder email. I did a few jumps for joy hearing everybody respond to this, because I was sitting there going, it's just me. It's just me. But like, we're doing that. It was validation that our program was kind of currently on the right track. And the irony that some of the progress we made on some of these things wouldn't have been possible so overtly without the lockdown and things we pivoted to during this time. So I wanted to point to some of those things that I was celebrating about as an offering to see where maybe we could incorporate these in our programs now more broadly. One of the reasons why I was so intrigued to watch this particular panel is because we've been working with Haisan on our alternative program, which is a video program, and a number of formerly incarcerated folks who have been through these programs represented on this screen and screens elsewhere. And we're moving into a situation now where we have a little bit of a more guaranteed situation that our next series of this program is going to be shown in the facility where we've been working. And so that piece about having formerly incarcerated folk, but not just formerly incarcerated folk, but graduates of the program who are having a stable, healed life on the outside, acting as mentors. At least via video, we're going to be able to be doing that. And we're also working with formerly incarcerated, a particular formerly incarcerated teaching artist. And our challenge is like how to find more of those folks locally, so that when we're in person again, I'm not just flying Haisan to San Diego.
Although he'd love that.
Though he'd be very happy for that.
Oh,
he
yes.
said that to me overtly. Also,
You can fly me out there if you like.
I know. We want to go there, Stephen. Come on. It's going to be a role reversal. We want a residency out there. Also about the playing multiple roles, that our program seems to be different than the ones represented, in that's been part of our tactic generally, is that when we go into a performance mode, we cast scene by scene, and that's intentionally to give multiple entries into empathy, but work with different folks
Nice.
in the room, but also to avoid stars and bit parts. And so I was like, yes, so glad
That's great.
But I loved the aspect of overtly looking for roles that resonate with your victims and having that be an overt strategy is something we have not done, as opposed to folks saying, I'm really interested in this because, and then just going with that. So I thought that was really an intriguing entry point. And but I'm curious if there's anyone who feels like that is I don't know, too overt. Like I feel a bit nervous about that coming in as like an agenda. Yeah. What do you think?
I have a thought on that. I hear exactly what you're saying. We don't want the Shakespeare Project to become another program in the sense of evidence-based, we're going to fix you kind of programming. However, this is an opportunity, and we have found it in a stumble into it kind of way. I don't know if people recall from the recorded version of this panel that Haisan spoke about, playing Brutus and Julius Caesar, he played opposite Portia, and the male actor who played Portia was really good, really sold it. And Haisan found himself resonating with that character's performance and recognizing something within himself that he didn't really fully disclose at the time. He came up with it more later, and even more fully in our panel. But that was that he was getting a sense of how his secretiveness with his girlfriend had been impacting her. And so he just stumbled into that by playing the role. So I think a lot of it does happen that way. But I don't know, I'd be interested to hear from Steve and Rob on this. I would not be averse to inviting participants to look for that and then leave it to them, not make it an assignment, but leave it to them to pick up on that suggestion or not. What do others think?
Yeah, well, I agree. I think in going through the dialogue of Shakespeare, there can be shadows, skeleton bones that sort of effuse out of the wording, where sometimes you can be on stage and something that you've tucked away, hidden, and not been conscious of for a long time can suddenly burst out. So I guess in that sense, if the focus is on other people, victims, we traditionally haven't had empathy for other people. So at least if we can sense other people and how we've affected other people, I think that would be greater healing and growth mentally to bring other people into those bubbles of the mind.
Yeah. So it would be something you would gravitate toward.
Oh yeah, I think so. I think so. Like, I think when you first start just wording Shakespeare, there can be no connection. So as you trust people, as you give of yourself to other people, as you're vulnerable, I believe that some of those hidden emotions and feelings can flow out through the wording. So in that coming out and allowing the victim narrative to circulate in your subconscious, at least then possibly we can touch base with those other people and at least then be empathetic about how they suffered through situations.
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said. I'd also add that in the process of what it sounds like you're doing, Erica, and what we do as well, is giving people an opportunity to express an interest in a character or a type of character or so on. You are asking that question. And it also, and we work this way even with our professional company, our professional actors on the outside, is a kind of a thing of go as deeply as it's for you to do and as superficially as you need to. Not deep as you can, because sometimes people, well, yeah, sure, deep as you can, or deep as it's safe to, deep as you want to, as superficially as you need to. The other thing I'd say, and again, this is something that, we find with any kind of actor, is there really any character that won't resonate with any person on some way? Sometimes, the character chooses you or the role chooses you. And in fact, the empathy comes from also inhabiting characters with which you feel no connection.
Yes.
Because feeling no connection is as powerful as feeling, oh yeah, that's my story. Well, we know your story. You know your story. What's it like to empathize with, to inhabit someone that you think I'm nothing like this person? Mm-hmm. That's where the empathy comes from. Otherwise, you're just building sympathy.
Is that, Erica, getting at something for you?
Yeah, and also what Kate offered in the chat about the invitation. I see framing it that way. I think, but what I felt receiving that kind of request or concept from Steve, right? That was Steve's idea. And even when I'm working with my colleague, Nikki Martinez, who was 25 years inside and worked as a counselor inside and still does now, there's
coming up next week in next week's
I
session,
know, wasn't she
actually.
awesome in her video? I'm not sure. Yeah. But is like a brave, like coming from that standpoint, going like, no, we've got to grab this. Like, don't step back from this. And a real like desire, like you've got to be in it to heal and like really going deep. And then as the teaching artist who's worked in this arena and other arenas where it's like, you're not the therapist in the room, you're not that professional, like having that caution. And in the middle, I feel like having worked with like Soraya Keating, who's a drama therapist who, because of her background, has I don't know, the wherewithal and the like the credentials to say, I'm overtly stepping in here in this way. And so I always find this work that we all know is therapeutic, but like where the facilitator role is. And so that's why I found that so interesting, that like overt statement, like we should be working on this, and like how folks on this panel right now felt about as the facilitator, as the not formally incarcerated facilitator, if that is your background, if that is true for you, sort of making overt statements like that. I think that's I don't know, it's just interesting where we are.
I found it interesting that, Steve introduced the idea, and Haisan really gravitated towards it with that story that I shared, and then Michael did as well. So it does seem, at just a sample of 3, that there's quite a bit of interest in that. I wanted to get to Kate Power's question online, which was, will someone explain about the puking dinosaur, please? This was an exercise taught to us by Kate Watke. I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly. She's an actor in Milwaukee who is one of our visiting artists. And Kate, it's simply this: you stand in a circle and one person walks across the circle and tags out the person opposite. They replace each other. But what happens is the person who's being walked toward observes the walk of the one coming toward them. And then when they cross the circle, they imitate in an exaggerated way the style of holding the body and walking. And then the next person picks up on that and imitates and amplifies, so that by the end of the exercise, you always end up with a puking dinosaur.
I have a reflection that's just related to that last question, or just the last discussion, and that was about being my role and my story, and how we can relate to many, if not all, of these characters in some fashion or another. Because I actually undertook a semester where, as opposed to casting, and this was The Tempest, casting Prospero and having him play Prospero the whole semester, every week they cast themselves, and the casting had to be different. So everyone played Ariel, right? No one wanted to do that at first. Everyone played Miranda. No one wanted to do that at first, but then it became routine. And so they all inhabited those characters and all had a chance to be Prospero, all had a chance to be Caliban, et cetera, et cetera. And we didn't get the memorization bit right. But I think that was secondary to the overall engagement that they had with the play as a whole, as opposed to just, character parts.
Yeah. I think I thought also at the time was that if you can try and be conscious of what victims of society have felt through our actions, and if you can take yours, who are probably the furthest away from our sort of thinking, I would suggest in most cases, then if you can play those roles that are way outside of your thought pattern, then you can come back and you can connect with some of those other roles, maybe be a little bit easier.
Mm-hmm.
But I like that puking dinosaur, Jonathan. It's similar to what the Shakespeare program was. We sort of went in blindly, having no idea what was happening. We were all from different walks of life, and slowly we grew together. We trusted. We started believing. We were vulnerable, and it developed into this. Well, probably not a puking dinosaur, Rob may argue, by the time it got to the stage. Some of the performances may have been, but it shaped into this manifestation that no one could be aware of.
Awesome.
when I started doing theater in prison, I chose the plays because my actors weren't really familiar with the literature of drama. And I think currently the most advanced program is up in Victoria, where the actors have their own company, the prison actors have their own company, and they choose the plays and they hire the directors and they do everything. And I chose Shakespeare to begin with because I love Shakespeare, but also because I was going to have 6 months rehearsals and I wanted plays that had great depth and dimension in every aspect. And we did a few plays, and one of the actors said, "Hey, could we do 12 Angry Men next year?" And I thought, oh, he knows some plays. And so I brought in 12 Angry Men, and they read the first act, and they all said, "We're doing it. This is what we're going to do." So that year, of the plays that I directed, it was the only non-Shakespeare play. And as a play, you learn a lot about anger, and also about this guy thing where anybody who doesn't agree with me is a moron. And so it's, an hour and a half of that. And it's a deep, it's a good drama, and it's a good exploration of that. And so we all, me included, got to immerse ourselves in those two things, I guess you would say. But with the Shakespeare plays, we're all immersing ourselves in so many more complex things: women, men, life, death, emotion, everything's in it. And we all get so much from it that I once asked Kurt when I was just beginning, I asked him for a suggestion of what play in his experience was the best one to do in prison. And he said, Shakespeare. And you intuitively, when it's time for the next year to pick the next play, you just know it's gotta be Winter's Tale, or whatever.
Yeah. Wonderful, Johnny. Yeah. And
that knowledge only comes with an enormous amount of bourbon.
Yeah. And then there's the intertextuality of Shakespeare. I mean, it's just one of the wonderful things about sticking with the playwright is that you're creating a whole world of knowledge and understanding and growth as you go along. Yeah. Well, we all know that.
I think so. And I think even as I first went in, I started retrospectively trying to understand how I got to a point where I committed this act. And it was core beliefs that I picked up when I was young. It was experiences that I had that was when I was young, and I developed into the person that I despise, the bully or the antagonist or the protagonist. But then I could stay on that channel where violence or anger are the two emotions that I primarily deal with, and that's very easy. But as I started to do studies and with Shakespeare or trying to learn Latin or whatever it is, opening my mind up to different aspects allowed me to be conscious of other things within our society, of the interactions, of how other people play their part in life. And I would try and say to people, for some, I noticed that maybe it might be three things in their brain, typically the girlfriend, the car, the football team. And if one of those things lost or left, it was like this massive crater left in their brain. So when really it should be just compartmentalized with 1,000 things that you think of. so that's why I would try and drag other people to Shakespeare, just to try to give them something else to think about, a different narrative to view the world, and then have a different perspective, and to reach out and trust in other people and see through what their eyes, what they're trying to say and what they're conveying. But yeah, I think what Johnny said with the Shakespeare, why it can be so challenging and so deep is because there's so many different avenues that Shakespeare comes from or takes you down or circles you around. And that's why it can be so challenging and raw, in that almost you're unaware of where this next line will lead. And it has to open up your mind to new ideas.
Well, actors, the reason I chose Shakespeare is because I'm an actor. Like actors love Shakespeare because the characters are so much juicier than anybody else.
Oh,
yes. Yeah.
I'm sorry, Deb, I was getting her comment. She said growth is very visual. She was resonating with the puking dinosaur thing. And could you want to keep saying that, but Deb, could you say something more about that?
Well, from my perspective, being on the other side, the growth that you see is from the time first that you enter the program, because you're quite unsure of what you're going to expect when you walk through that door, just because of the circumstances surrounding the incarcerated person. So the growth you see, not only in you through the participation of the way that you allow yourself to open up, because you see, I don't know, it's hard to understand or to put into words what it feels like when you're in a situation where your voice cannot be heard and you're told over and over again that what you say is not important. Then all of a sudden you come into this program and you have these women, these people like Johnny and Carla that say, it's okay to open up. It's okay to feel. It's okay for you to reach inside of yourself and use what you're feeling inside to make your character come to life. Now, I didn't have any I didn't have any experience while in prison with Shakespeare. However, as soon as I was released from prison, I immediately went into college, and I went into a theater arts major only and specifically because of what the program offered me while I was in there. Let me see a part of myself that I had no confidence in. But by the time I left there and what these people in this program offered to me, I grew to the point that I can tell myself with certainty at this point in my life, I can do absolutely anything I want. I can do anything, including playing Sir Thomas Erpingham in Henry V. And it was such a thrill. So not only from the inside do you see growth in yourself, but you see growth in the people from the outside that are coming in there and the way that they feel that they can open up to you as an incarcerated individual. Does that make sense? So the visual part of it is that you see it happening before your eyes.
Beautiful.
Wonderful. I think that's exactly right, Deb. I started thinking that kids that are growing up in not domestic violence, but situations where there's domestic violence, there may be sexual abuse. I start thinking that maybe some of these kids don't feel like they're valued in the community. So growing up, why would they value society back or the laws? So, and like you say, all of a sudden you're on the stage, you're the center point, and the other people in the group are giving you value. And even if that's anecdotally through a character, that confidence can come through individuals. And I've seen it as well. I recall one play where we got someone in the last minute. And for a week, he was trying to learn the lines, and he was hop-stepping all around the jail trying to learn these lines. His big moment come, he stepped in, and he was about 3 scenes too early. But he just went through, he carried on, he slowly sidled out through the back. Needless to say, I don't think he got a line right throughout the whole play. But we had people singing out from the back his lines. He was turning to the wall and saying, "Line, please." And that's how society is. I think, like, no one's got the spreadsheet on how to be the perfect person or how to handle every situation. But I think if you can just gain that confidence, that if you trust in people, then eventually you'll work yourself to a point.
I absolutely agree. I agree with that from all perspectives. But I have to say that through this program, the emphasis is confidence, that you allow those within a very structured housing to be able to dig down deep inside and find those things that have been there forever and be able to voice that through your acting, and let all of those within the confines that are watching you perform be able to feel what you're feeling. And I learned that from a point that these girls came to me crying, thanking me for allowing them to be part of what I did. And for me, that's where my confidence came in, because I thought, well, I must have been pretty convincing. I must have done an okay job. Or guess what, Debbie? Maybe you just put it out there where it needed to be heard. And the right people were listening. Fortunately enough, we have enough that come in from the outside to see what we do, that they're very surprised that within the confines of a prison that we are able to put on a performance that I would call a production, with very little things from the outside to work with, including costumes, including makeup, including anything. But we were able to pull it off. Therefore, our confidence level was able to rise. And I thank programs like you for that. And I encourage programs for you to keep going in there, because there are those that are coming out of there like me because of you.
You know, Deb, one thing you said that really resonated with me is so often when community members, theater professionals, anybody comes in to see these productions, we repeatedly hear the comment, I've been to a million productions of King Lear or whatever, but this one moved me the most. The actors were so raw, sincere, gutsy. They were putting something out there. They were taking risks that I don't see professional actors take. Mm-hmm. And that I hear that repeatedly.
Mm-hmm. And it is very true.
Just jumping in on that comment, Jonathan, mm-hmm. A guy came to see our King Lear who had seen 3 plays in New York that year, including Ian McKellen, and liked ours the best.
Awesome.
And I think it was because the dimension of love that was in our acting ensemble. Mm-hmm. And Carla and Deb, and Kurt Tofflin has talked about how essential to his theater program is his dialogue circle. And for our programs, that we built a trust and a love among all the actors. And then when the public came in, it was just a complete love in, with hugging and mm-hmm. and so much joy. And those experiences for the actors, I've heard so many say that being seen and being appreciated and being loved on was just the best thing that happened to them in prison.
Yeah.
I just wanted to throw in there, Johnny, that from the actor's point of view, that looking out at those of you in the audience that are in from the outside and seeing your faces, the faces of shocked people not having a clue that something like that can come from within the walls of a prison. That is so uplifting to the person that's looking from the other side out. So I just wanted to throw that out there, Johnny, because your face and Carla's face were the faces, and Dawn's face were the faces I looked for, because you gave me something that society had taken away from me. And I will never be able to thank you enough for that. I can only carry on your legacy, and all of you have a legacy that it is my dream to go back in there and help those ones in there see what can happen if you have confidence in yourself. And so I'm going to shut up. I've probably talked way too much, but I just love is a great word. And I just love all of you for loving me enough to do what you do.
We love you, Deb. We love that you're here.
Yeah, I think you're right, Deb. No one else knows where other people are in their mental space. So I think and I thought of that the other day. I watched something about weeds growing out of concrete. And if you put that to bad thinking habits, anxiety, depression, bitterness, anger, fear, they take no work at all. But if you want to grow tulips or roses, then you have to put a little bit of work in. You have to water them. You have to tend to them. And that's how I thought about the Queensland Shakespeare Ensemble, that in this place of overgrown with weeds, these people came in with a little bit of water, and that's really all it took for many of us to start flowering.
I'm thinking back to Erica's early comment about victim empathy and wanting to tread carefully with making that connection. I just want, since we're giving shout outs, I want to give a shout out to the Reflecting Shakespeare series, which is totally amazing and wonderful resource that everybody should be watching and using. And I just wanted to let you know that in Milwaukee, the Optimist Theater Company, a Shakespeare theater company, is really tapped into that now, because they're looking for ways to connect with youth facilities in the Milwaukee area. I just wanted to make that connection. But also back to that issue of victim empathy, I think one thing that levels the playing field and makes it less threatening is to talk about how all of us have been victims, including me, have created victims. So we've all been perpetrators, we've all been victims, we've all been bystanders. Just take those three roles. And just to say, just be interesting to keep that in the back of your mind as we're looking at this scene or this play, what roles are being played in relation to that set, and where have you been in that circle? Looks like Rob is ready to say something.
Thank you. Us slow talking Australians. It's kind of moved on from there now, but I was going to say we were starting to touch on something which for me is extremely important. Steve's story, but also I think it was Deb who mentioned the sitting in the circle, and of course, well, like most theatre practitioners, sitting in the circle is a big part of what we do. And Steve's story pointed out, it's, for me, and this is perhaps a cultural difference or perhaps just revealing my own personal political metaphysical view, it's not so much I can do anything, it's we can do anything. I know I'm surrounded by people from the most individualistic culture on the planet, but for me, it's really, and the feedback we get is equal parts from participants, equal parts about personal experience, personal growth, but about that formation of intentional community. that combines the physical, the intellectual, the spiritual, all of that, and mutual support in a context, not only in a society that doesn't necessarily place that at the apex of achievement, but in a context where individualism is often rife, and where the strong individual is respected or feared, is to create that sense of, yeah, I can do anything, but more importantly, we can. Yeah, that's all.
Yeah.
That resonates hard with me, Rob. Absolutely. I mean, I'm thinking about our the stated goals of the programs that we do have nothing to do with acting or Shakespeare. It's all about reducing social isolation and increasing connection and deepening empathy, and providing a vehicle for creative expression and all that stuff. But it's that teamwork aspect, and that finding out that there is a place with at all, especially in prison. But I mean, in fact, all of my theatrical work is about finding out about that ensemble factor, that team factor, and what can happen when everyone joins in. And I was so touched by Haisan in your video, and then it seemed to ripple out that, like, you know, I was in this program, I want everyone to be super committed, and it's because we can do it together, and everyone's going to do it as committed as I am. And I also was reflecting on seeing that dynamic play out in the group, that you all, you know, as the facilitator, you're grateful for those who are being like, we want to get this together, guys, but also knowing that there are people in that group who need to go through the process, maybe less committed, and then reflect on, oh, I could I have been more committed, and still be invited back to grow further and not be bullied out before. And but I mean, I've been that person in the show being like, why the hell isn't she pulling her weight, you know? But in this situation, you know, so that is really that lesson about where am I in the we, or, oh, like on the other side of that, oh, I could have impacted the we. It's not just me on my own here, maybe not memorizing my lines or whatever that is, but having an aha moment about your place in a community, and the fact that, yeah, I think that ripples out. The we ripples out so much.
Yeah.
Hello, everybody. I'm so nervous. I just wanted to know what you guys were working on now in this virtual format, distanced, and Shakespeare, and how you were dealing with that. And then I'm actually just wrapping up watching the video, but it was a great conversation. Thank you, you guys. And then that was the other thing that jumped up off. I mean, that's so much part of theater, getting the trust place so that we can all get as deep as we need to go in the characters, hold that space, do that work. So how long does that usually take to be butt naked? Those are two questions there.
I think that's up to the individual in wanting to strip off, to keep that analogy. I think from my experience, I've seen people that have gone in and have just gone through the lines and not really connected. And then at other times, they'll go in and they'll dig into the character, that they'll try and find where they can connect with it. And I've seen where, to touch on what Eric has said before, where some players want to say, look, you need to learn your lines, you need to do this, or this is your cue, or and I think if we take that to outside society, what you say, Erica, is that people are at different stages. So how I tried to connect that into society is when I get on a bus and the bus driver's angry, I just try and think, well, he's at a different stage in his life. We're all in different spaces philosophically or spiritually or wherever. And as Jonathan says, that we're all the oppressor, we're all the victim. It's all sort of entwined. So I try and now think about when I'm walking around in society, I just think that Other people are in different stages of their life. And it's not for me to try and correct them or change them. It's just to accept them, and epiphanies and new ideas will come to them as they're ready to accept them, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
To respond to those, how long does it take to be butt naked? Well, we are actually, in many ways, we're constrained in terms of time in our program, in our prison program. The very first year we ran our project, 2006, we ran the program as a 5-month program, which I realize is a lot shorter than what a lot of you folks do. And what we found is that for 2 reasons, a good one and a bad one, that was way too long. We didn't have anyone at the end of the 5 months, or hardly anyone who was there at the beginning of the 5 months, for 2 reasons. The good reason is we don't tend to put people away for quite as long as you folks on the other side of the Pacific do. So I think that's a good thing. The bad thing, in Australian prisons, there's an enormous amount of mobility. People get moved from one centre to another for a variety of reasons, which I don't want to go into. So we ended up settling on 3 to 3.5 months as the maximum length of time we could run a program over. I would say my observation that, as Steve, absolutely what Steve said, people are at different stages, but also for many people, for most people, it takes a couple of cycles. And I believe, I forget who, but there's research that actually says that in order to see any kind of long-term impact by whatever metrics they're using, you really need to be involved in several projects. Which is extremely difficult when you've got, oh, that person's not here anymore this year, they've moved to blah, blah, or whatever. Or if we're lucky, they've been released on parole or so forth. To the other question, what are we doing in this digital world? I don't want to rub it in too much, but we have moved back to live theatre here. Our professional company, yeah, I know. Look, in Australia, we have more sheep than humans. So we're actually very good at following instructions as given by our health experts and staying home and wearing masks and stuff. Sorry, I'm making fun of you now, which I shouldn't do. It's very naughty. Yeah, so our professional program was not able last year to do its usual show in the park. So we actually did an audio show. We did an audio version, like a radio play, except it was put on the internet, which you can in fact still download from the Queensland Shakespeare Ensemble's website. We did I can say it, I'm not in a theatre, Macbeth in the Dark. So we ended up doing an audio version of that. Please have a listen. But in terms of our prison work, Liliana, who's here, wave hello, Liliana. Yeah, Liliana there directed the production in a women's prison last year, and it finally got to go and to even have a public audience. It was originally supposed to perform in May. There was a lockdown, obviously, so that sort of stopped. And then they were able to start up again, and after I think 2 weeks it got down again. By Christmas they were actually able to put on a Midsummer Night's Dream in the women's prison, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, by the time they got to performance, only one of the women who started out with the program in March was still in that cast, but they pushed on, so we didn't have to digitally pivot, which is possibly just as well, because that would have been extremely difficult. But there were long periods where we were not able to get in there to work. But yeah, so, for us, it wasn't as challenging as it would be over there.
And I was lucky enough to join Jonathan and Rob and Kate. I can see Kate with some online Shakespeare. So that was very traumatic for me. But I think just to touch on Kurt's point there, where he says building the trust changes the moment a new person enters the circle. I sort of think the same thing, that you see these guys come in and they got the persona and nothing upsets them, nothing rocks them, they're all pretty cool. And when you've got to start being that dinosaur puking across the stage, all that fallacy and all that identity and all that rubbish just has to be peeled off, because you have to be raw and vulnerable, and if you can do that in that first game, that certainly helps, I think, to getting to finding Shakespeare.
Mm. And to just put my oar in on those questions, let's see. We go 9 months a year, minimally, sometimes longer, depends on the year. But we meet Tuesdays and Thursday nights, 6 to 8:30 p.m. every week. And what I found the one semester that because I think in semesters, being in higher ed, the one semester that I tried to scale it back to once a week, something was lost. So we went back right away to our full schedule. That just works for us. I know it's different for everybody. And then in terms of what I've been doing since COVID, most obviously, I got on the stick with this pulling people together for weekly readings of Shakespeare plays. And that includes many of us who are connected through Shakespeare in Prisons Network and Returned Citizens. And that was very therapeutic, I think, for a lot of us. Something to do, some way to be together. And that went on for quite some time. I think we did at least 20 of them. Mm-hmm. And we then had a couple of late additions recently, Anthony and Cleopatra and Cymbeline just last week. Mm-hmm. So that's been something. In terms of my work inside Racine Correctional Institution, I've been corresponding, but it's been very rough. It's the sense of connection is not as strong as I want it to be. I send stuff in. I don't hear much back. I know that Rowan, who's here, I hope, has had great success in Britain with her correspondence courses, and maybe she could say a few words about that, how that's worked out.
That's Dr. Rowan.
Dr. Rowan, indeed. Congratulations.
Yes. Oh, maybe she left. But she's, yeah, she was here at the beginning, and she's just done amazing work throughout Britain with the correspondence work. Yeah.
Jonathan, we have a session with her too that'll be coming up soon.
Great.
Too, and where she lays it all out. It's fantastic work.
Well, it looks like we have about 4 minutes if we're sticking to schedule.
Oh, what a shame.
Time flies.
I will add, just to kind of stick it to Rob a little bit, we're actually in person too at our juvenile detention facility here. So that's been going since they wanted us back in May to start coming in person. It was a little bit too early then, but then Grant Mudge started the project in October, taught 12 weeks, and now Christy and I are teaching 12 weeks, but we're going a little bit virtual right now because the spike is so bad here. But we both got our shots yesterday, and so we're looking to go back in mid-Feb.
Fantastic.
Because
yeah,
Zoom in this setting is not ideal. Zoom in this is not good.
Yeah. Although I'll say again, reflecting Shakespeare goes through that wall of the internet pretty well. I was playing along, doing the exercises, everything, So, and also, if you want to, another thing, because it's so well packaged and so clear, you can easily translate the reflecting Shakespeare modules into something that could be sent in on paper if they don't have access to video. Thank you, everyone. Wonderful conversation.
Thank you all so much for that, and the beautiful session that that preceded this, which if you haven't watched, it's a wonderful piece. But I guess I'll close us out then. So yeah, we will hope to see you again next Friday and every Friday for infinity.